Commissioner, can you hear me? Let's see, Mandy?
I can hear you. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody in the audience and anybody online that can hear me, we're just having some technical difficulties, so we will be working through them. We'll get started as soon as we can.
But all this now. No. No one.
Hello? Hi. Yep. Okay, I figured. I know, yes, I can hear you. You just can't hear me.
Or you can call my phone and I can hopefully phone up to the speaker. But that is up to you.
Well, I'll probably just not do it then, because the only issue I have with doing that is number one, my phone's really close to dying. And you know, if I have calls or texts or something coming in, I don't want it like interrupting the audio. That's my biggest concern. So oh yeah, no problem. Okay, all right, thank you. Bye-bye.
joining us on Zoom this evening. We've already talked about the technical difficulties that we're having. And you'll need to come to City Hall in order to give testimony this evening instead of being able to do it on Zoom. Let me see here. During the public testimony portion of the meeting, oh gosh, this is going to throw me way off here. So that's for everybody online. Okay. With that debacle, we'll begin with roll call. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lorcher. Here. Commissioner Grace.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Seal.
Here.
Absent is Commissioner Wheeler, Commissioner Rivera, and Commissioner Stoddard.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. We have no modifications. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. First is to approve the minutes of the July 6, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Then we have findings of facts and conclusions of law for file number H 2023-0025 for Loose Screw Brewery and file number H 2023-0026 Milano Animal Healthcare Facility. Can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, I'd like to explain the public hearing process. We will open each item individually and begin with the staff report. Staff will report their findings on how the item adheres to our comprehensive plan and unified development code. After staff has made their presentation, the applicant will come forward to present their case and respond to staff comments. They will have 15 minutes to do so. After the applicant is finished, we will open the floor to public testimony. Each person will be called on only once during the public testimony. The clerk will call the names individually, those who signed up in advance to testify. You will need to state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to address the commission. If you have previously sent pictures or a presentation for the meeting, it will be displayed and you can run the screen and presentation. And we will give assistance if needed. If you have established that you are speaking on behalf of a larger group like an HOA where others from that group will allow you to speak on their behalf, you will have up to 10 minutes. After all those who have signed up in advance have spoken, we will invite others who may wish to testify. When you're finished, if the commission does not have questions for you, you will return to your seat in chambers. You will no longer have the ability to speak. And please remember, we generally do not call people back up. After all testimony has been heard, the applicant will be given another 10 minutes to come back and respond. When the applicant is finished responding to questions and concerns, we will close the public hearing and the commissioners will have the opportunity to discuss and hopefully be able to make final decisions or recommendations to City Council as needed. So at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing for item number H 2023-0016 for Jump Creek South Apartments. And we will begin with the staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The applicant has submitted a conditional use permit for Junk Creek South Apartments. The site consists of 3.29 acres of land zoned R15 located at the northwest corner of North Black Cat Road and McMillan. The history on the property is there is an existing development agreement and multiple final plats approved. The comprehensive plan flume designation is medium density residential. The subject property is one of 2 multifamily properties that was approved with the preliminary plat. The gross density for the multifamily portion of this development is at 13.37 dwelling units to the acre, which is higher than the medium density residential designation of the comprehensive plan. However, this was contemplated during the review and approval process of the Jump Creek development. The overall gross density for the Jump Creek development is approximately 4.54 dwelling units to an acre, including the 44 multifamily units proposed with this development and the previous approval of the 28 multifamily units, which is consistent with the medium density residential land use designation. A two-story multifamily development containing 44 dwelling units consisting of 11 residential apartment buildings with a leasing office that is 400 square feet. Is to be served to use by both multifamily developments once build-out of the project is complete. During the review of the previous multifamily development, the applicant did not commit on the record to did commit on the record to constructing the leasing office with this phase of the development. The buildings meet the design setbacks for the multifamily development as proposed on the site plan. The site plan depicts screen trash standards for only one trash enclosure provided for the multifamily development. Staff recommends that the applicant work with Republic Services to establish an approved location for the enclosures, as well as an adequate quantity of trash and recycle bins to service this development prior to the certificate of zoning compliance. A minimum of 80 square feet of private usable open space shall be required for each unit. In the plans, the floor plans and the architectural plans state that there will be decks and patios, and those are depicted on the floor plans that meet this standard. Open space and design requirements, because the site is only 3.29 acres, the total baseline land area of common qualified open space is 10% of the gross land for multifamily developments of 5 acres or more does not apply. The site was required to develop with a minimum of 15% open space to include the following amenities: 3 tot lots, internal walking paths, a 10-foot wide multi-use path on the south side of West Gondola Drive, and 5% open space. Additionally, the master pathways plan requires a 10-foot multi-use pathway to be included as part of the development plan for this site. Both multifamily developments approved as part of the Jump Creek overall development have access to the common areas and site amenities throughout the entire development. In addition to the baseline open space requirement, a minimum of outdoor open space shall be provided, 250 square feet for each unit containing more than 500 square feet up to 1,200 square feet of living area. All 44 units are between 500 and 1,200. So therefore 11,000 square feet of common open space is required. Because the site is below the 5 acres in size, the baseline requirement does not apply. The submitted plans include 2 open grassy areas. These appear to be over 5,000 square feet in size and are illustrated as a drainage swale and a subsurface sand drainage area. Additionally, a picnic area located behind the leasing office is shown on the site plan. Staff recommends that the applicant open or submit an open space exhibit that demonstrates compliance with this. To satisfy the specific use standards for the proposed 44 multifamily units, a minimum of 3 amenities, 1 from each category, must be provided. These proposed amenities were the leasing office with an outdoor barbecue that serves both multifamily developments, a picnic area with tables, benches, landscaping, a shade structure attached to the office, a bicycle repair station, a community garden, and charging stations for electric vehicles. Additionally, there is a multi-use pathway that surrounds the site, serving as another amenity. The amenities meet the standards in the UDC. The dimensional standards, this development meets the dimensional standards for the R15 zoning district as well as the multifamily development. However, staff recommends that the applicant reorientate building H to face south and move the release office to face east in a central location within the development to improve the accessibility and convenience. All access was previously approved with the Jump Creek preliminary plat. Primary access for this will occur from West Daphne Street, which connects to North Black Hat Road. There is additional access through numerous roads in the Jump Creek subdivision, which will eventually terminate at West Riva Capri Street and North Maplestone Drive. Since the drive aisle within this development is not classified as a private street, the street names shown on the site plan should be removed. The common drive located on lot 10, block 1 of Jump Creek subdivision number 6 serves as access for lots 22 and 23, block 1 of Jump Creek South subdivision and functions solely as a secondary fire access point for the multifamily development. And as per the fire department's requirements, 2 bollards need to be installed on the property line of the multifamily development spaced out 20 feet apart. These bollards should be accompanied by a heavy chain and Knox padlock on the property line of the multifamily development. The buildings within this development will have their address assigned based on West Daphne Street. And furthermore, it is recommended to place a wayfinding sign near the entrance of the multifamily development to provide clear directions. Off-street parking for the multifamily development is required to be provided per the UDC based on the number of bedrooms per unit. The applicant is proposing 46 units consisting of 36 two-bedroom units and 8 three-bedroom units. In addition, 1 guest space for every 10 units is required per the UDC. Based on the total number of units proposed and their bedroom count distribution, a minimum of 100 parking spaces, with a minimum of 44 of these spaces to be covered in a garage or by a carport. According to the site plan submitted, the applicant is proposing 100 spaces with 43 of these spaces to be covered by a carport. The proposed parking just meets the minimum code requirements. However, 1 additional parking stall should be covered parking stall should be added. Additionally, the plan submitted is deficient in trash enclosures for which may impact the proposed parking. Bicycle parking is required per the standards of the UDC, and that complies with the site plan. A 5-foot wide sidewalk is existing along West Daphne Street connecting to the multifamily development. The applicant is proposing attached sidewalks on either side of the pedestrian walkways throughout the entire site. Internal pedestrian walkways are required to be distinguished from vehicular services through the use of pavers, colored or scored concrete. The proposed pedestrian sidewalk shall be constructed with a different material than the driving surface, with the plan submitted with the certificate of zoning compliance. A 10-foot wide multi-use pathway is required within the landscape buffer along North Blackheath Road from West Daphne Street to the intersection of West McMillan as part of the pathways master site plan. The pathway should be placed in a 14-foot wide easement, which would be submitted to the planning division prior to certificate of zoning compliance. And additionally, the applicant's engineer shall provide written documentation that the pathway was constructed per the recommended specifications in accordance with the UDC. Landscaping is required along all pathways in accordance with the UDC. Landscaping, the applicant is required to construct 25-foot wide landscapers along North Black Cat Road and along McMillan, and the landscape plan does comply with this. All fencing constructed on the site is required to comply with the standards of the UDC, and they also are in compliance on the landscape plan. The applicant has submitted conceptual building elevations for the future multifamily fourplex buildings, and residential projects require administrative design review and approval. So staff will look through that once that is submitted, and a certificate of zoning compliance for the site design. And written testimony is none, and staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit with the conditions listed in the staff report. And that concludes staff's presentation, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant like to come forward?
For the record, Kent Brown, 3161 East Springwood is my address. Stacy, if you could put up the little slides that it's kind of interesting. I've been doing this for 33 years, doing planning work. And when I created my own company, this is one of the first projects I worked on. So in 2014 is when this preliminary plat was approved, the fall of 2014. I wasn't involved in the entitlement part, but I've done all the phases. So I've been very involved with it. It's not on this. What this preliminary plat shows in the very northeast corner is where we did some other apartment buildings. I'll just look this way and not talk. So the open spaces that are there are for both the single family residents and the multifamily residents. If you look at the vicinity map that's on the right-hand side, you can see that when this was originally approved, this was like the only thing that's out there. It doesn't look that way today. Stacy's plan and what's in your staff report shows a much different view. We go to the next slide. So building H that Stacy talked about that she wants rotated is down at the bottom of the screen, right there where the cursor is. We're in agreement with that. That really opens things up, I think. And by putting that office, patio and all of that there, I think that that really helps in the overall view there. It kind of moves it closer to the center, and we're in agreement with that. I had the engineer look at it and we can make that work. So the office that is on the left will be basically where the north part of that building is. Trash enclosure that's on the other side. Today I got a letter from Republic Storage, and they said that we're adequately taking care of the trash and that they like the location of where we're putting the trash enclosure. So I can provide staff with a copy of that letter. This plan also shows at the very top that we have a map that is required for any of your apartment complexes, that there's a directional map. It's on the left-hand side as you're pulling in. So where the driver's pulling, you can see the map to know which buildings are. I just thought it was neat. The next.
Seems like technology is running rampant tonight.
Yes, it is tonight. So this is the landscape plan, and you can better see from that the office, there's raised beds for a community garden, there's a bike repair station, there's a barbecue that's attached right next to the office with, there you go, thank you. It was on until I turned and looked at it, so
It knows you're looking, you're
it
watching.
really does. I won't. The only reason I show you that is so that you can see where that clubhouse is at, and realistically, the buildings are the same size. So if we rotate it around, there shouldn't be any issues with that. The next slide. This is a picture of the office, and as you look at that, the upper part is where the picnic tables, the barbecue, and the bike repair thing is, and then the office to the south. When we did the apartments in phase 4, we temporarily provided one of the units as a temporary office until we got this one built. So it will remain, but then it will be responsible for the entire amount of apartments that are within the entire development. And then they'll have it manned from there. The next one. It's just another picture of the office. We've been working with this for quite some time. The reason I brought up that this started 9 years ago is just sometimes as planning and zoning commissioners, which I have been for the city of Meridian, you get something approved, and I would say even the general public, and they view that it's going to be there next week. And This project, we tried to move along as quickly as possible. And we still have a number of homes, but we've recorded 7 phases of the development for single family. 6 for single family and 1 for multifamily. This requirement from the staff is asking us to record a plat on this one. So by the time we're done, we've been working on this for a decade. Not all those projects, just immediately happen, and traffic has changed. Highway District has already taken up the right of way. We've given them the right of way that's adjacent to this site so that they can make those Highway District improvements as a part of this, moving this forward. And just seek your approval, and I'll stand for any questions you might have.
All right, thank you much. Commissioners, do we have questions?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lurcher, go ahead.
you said there are 7 phases. What phase are you in now?
So we had, this would be the 8th phase of doing it. It'll eventually be called, it's kind of confusing. We had to call one phase Jump Creek South. So we did 6 numerical phases and then Jump Creek South. And this one will be called Jump Creek 7 as we go forward. So
And which phase are you in now? Jump Creek 2, 3, 4?
we've built, all of them are built, and all 7 have been recorded.
So this is the last.
This is the last hurrah in this entire development. Yeah. It kind of started in the middle. And in fact, we had a temporary access to Black Cat Road until we could meet emergency fire provisions. And then we actually had to go in and vacate that roadway because when we did phase 1, we did it incorrectly. We shouldn't have dedicated it. We should have just had it as a lot, common lot, and providing access to the public and then make it go away. But this was the first time. I mean, 10 years ago, the Highway District hadn't thought about providing a temporary means in that looks like a main entrance and then making it go away. So today they've worked that out, and I'm recording a plat in Boise that we're calling it a common area, but when you go look at it, looks like the main entrance to the subdivision. But the only reason they're allowing us to have that is for a temporary purpose, because they want to limit the access points to major roads.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, so you talked about building H rotation. I don't think I heard anything about the additional parking spaces in close proximity that's recommended in the staff report. Do you have any that amenable to you?
I did ask the client, what of our possibilities that we could do. As Stacy was reading the numbers, she said that we had 8 3-bedroom units. I asked, how critical is it for them to have the 3-bedroom units? And they said, actually, the 2 bedrooms rent better. So they even had a suggestion, which I'm excited about, if you wanted to pick up, from the code standpoint, is tell us not to have 3 bedrooms, and they'll apparently, if you don't put a closet in there, it's considered a den. And in the world that's changed from when this was originally approved, COVID is having more people work at home. I'd have that as an office and in a rental facility. So just change the floor plan to remove the closet, and then it's not. But we could remove 8 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms or whatever to increase the number of parking. If that's what you so choose. Any other questions?
Commissioner Grace.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Mhm.
So I had a similar question related to parking. So you talked to Republic trash, I guess.
Republic's, yeah.
And they were good with the location. Were they good with the adequacy, the amount that you had? Okay, so that won't affect the.
Doesn't move. And sorry about that. And that's not technology, it's just old. Yeah, the approval letter speaks to it being adequate for this facility and large enough for holidays and weekends and that kind of thing, to cover the amount of waste that would be generated by 40.
And then second question, if you reorient that building H and move the office, you don't lose any open space, I wouldn't think.
Shouldn't, I mean, we got the same amount of footprint.
Right.
I totally get why staff is asking for it. I mean, we've looked at that plan over and over again, trying to address like parking. What this site in the original approval, that was a lot larger because they weren't planning on a roundabout on the corner. And so this site has had to kind of change a little bit over time, and it's gotten smaller, but at the same time, I think in the original plan.
Thank you.
Quick question for staff on the comment in the staff report for the inadequacy for the essentially the trash receptacle. Is there code around that, or is it?
Republic Services, sorry, Mr. Chair. Republic Services is actually the governing body that they have to submit the approval with a certificate of zoning compliance and design review that says that they're good with it.
Okay, I tend to agree with staff, and the only reason that I say that is because if you only have one option, it only takes one person being a jerk to make that not an option. And I've seen that in different locations over and over. One person decides they don't want a mattress frame and they throw it in there. Nobody else can throw anything in it. So it would be nice to see two of them in there.
But there is two inside the enclosure. What we're talking about is that it's adequate. You
Okay,
only have one location for the enclosure, but
okay,
there's two inside.
okay. So you can accommodate one jerk and still have adequate storage. Gotcha.
Depends on how big a jerk.
That's right. Well, we can't measure that. So, okay, that makes a much more sense. So, because I was kind of thinking, man, one for all those just doesn't make sense. Gotcha.
One structure, physical structure that's there. Actually, on one side of the structure, you look closely at the plan, there's the cluster mailboxes attached to the side. There's two.
Gotcha. Dumpsters. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. That makes much more sense. So if I would have been paying more attention to the picture, I'd have seen that. Commissioners?
It was technology.
It was technology got in the way for sure. Are there any other, no more questions? We'll have you take a seat and thank you. Joy, do we have anybody signed up?
Mr. Chair, we have Jonathan Davis.
Mr. Davis? You want to come up and testify? Oh, okay. Gotcha. And real quick, because I see somebody else has come online for our the folks that are joining us online tonight, we are having technical difficulties where you will be able to hear us, but we cannot hear you. So if you would like to give testimony on either of the applications this evening, either for Jump Creek or Stapleton, you'll have to come down to council chambers in order to do that. Sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, there is no one else.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that'd like to come up and testify? No takers? Okay. Anything else? All right, with that, we'll take a motion to close the public hearing for file number H 2023-0016.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for file number H 2023-0016 for Jump Creek South Apartments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, public hearing is closed. Who wants to start on this one?
Mr. Chairman, I don't mind. It is an awful lot of buildings in a 3.29 acre spot. But it's been going on for a little while and I like the layout. I like the idea of reorienting that building. I would say that I don't know that I'm comfortable telling them that they have to eliminate bedrooms and things like that. I feel more comfortable saying you just have to have adequate parking. So to the extent that the applicant made that offer that we could compel them to do that, I for one, don't feel comfortable telling them that. I'd rather tell them that they need to have adequate parking. But other than that, I think it's a good project for that corner. And like I said, it's been going on for a little while. So I'm in favor of it.
Go right ahead.
Kind of in the same spot on the parking versus bedroom removal. And one thing I've been bouncing around into this question for Kurt, but also for Commissioner Grace. A, is it possible, Kurt? And then B, would you be more comfortable with something that would compel them either to add parking spots or to limit bedrooms? So it's their choice, but it creates the ability to say, hey, if you can't find more spots, then I mean that's if you don't want to put more spots. A, Kurt. B. Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Smith. I think this is a conditional use permit and the commission is able to place conditions to mitigate the impact of the project. So that would be an appropriate mitigation. You can do A, additional parking, or B, fewer bedroom counts. So I think that's within your purview. So to answer your first part of your question, yes, that is possible.
You sure? Lord Chair, go right ahead.
Commissioner Steele, I'm challenged on this one for two reasons. Number one, it was approved in 2014. And that was, I can't add that fast, but that was many years ago. And the area has changed quite a bit. So based on 36 2 bedrooms and 8 3-bedrooms, you're looking at an average of 96 more cars and 192 movements of cars per day on an intersection that can't handle the traffic that's already there. So in one sense, it's kind of grandfathered in because they're just trying to cross their T's and dot their I's and finish their project. And it wasn't anybody's fault. There was a recession or supply chain issues or whatever, and he's just trying to finish it up. In the other sense that, adding 96 more cars or families with, in and out almost 200 a day on an intersection that can't even handle it, with ACHD not even getting ready to build the roundabout for another, 2 years? They're just taking public comments now. I struggle with this because yes, it should be there, but the question is, should it be there right now? Now, if we all wait for ACHD to catch up with development, we'll all be gone from this planet before that actually happens. So the question then becomes, as a council and what's best for the city of Meridian, to go ahead and say yes for the conditional use permit for you to go forward, or we ask them to wait, but then that becomes a financial hardship for the development that's already been approved since 2014, when they're just trying to complete their project. So I guess I'm asking rhetorical questions here or making just comment. I'm on the fence because yes, they should be able to complete it, but no, we can't really add 200 more trips for cars per day. So I'm a big maybe on this one.
Yeah, and I kind of on purpose wanted to wait till last. We've had many long hearings and many a late night over McMillan and Black Cat. We have denied an application that was on the southeast corner of Black Cat and McMillan. We recommended denial, city council denied it. So it is still an empty piece of land based on the, traffic alone. the issue that I have with this, well, I'll start with everything that I like about it. I like, you know, the way that the multifamily is put together, the fact that it has 10-foot pathways. You know, there's some room to breathe in here, as it would be. So I have no issues with that. I have no issues with multifamily at all. What I do have issues with is that we're working on an approved report from ACHD that used data from 2013. And that is quick math. That is 10 years ago. That's a decade. So I didn't have gray hair when this study was completed. So that said, it was approved back then. And like Commissioner Lorcher said, nobody knew that it was going to take 10 years to get to this point. But you know, I'm having a very difficult time with needing to approve this, because essentially what our purview is this essentially the multifamily function a good use for this plot of land? And traffic aside, I would say yes. The problem is that we're using a traffic report from 2013 in order to make that decision. And we have no other option than to honor it, because we don't own the roads. ACHD does. So to be perfectly honest, I have such a hard time with that at this point in time. And I'm getting so tired of having these meetings and having to talk about McMillan and Black Cat and how it is just adequately or inadequately, it does not provide for the traffic load that's on it today, much less a few years from now, when they decide to start planning for the roundabout that, you know, that's going to go in there in 2028, as well as further down the road when they might include Black Cat or McMillan in any further plans to do anything else. You know, we're putting in a lot of homes, a lot of multifamily, and I stress the word family, a lot of kids along this corridor, a lot of schools along these corridors as well. And you can't so much as put a foot between the white line and the gravel on the road. I mean, when I was a kid, I rode my bike everywhere. You can't here. And I've been to, you know, funerals in this valley for kids that will never be able to do that again because of inadequate roadways. So to be honest, I would rather vote no and have city council have to weigh in on this. I have nothing against the builder. I have nothing against multifamily. I just think that it is wrong to approve this, knowing the traffic troubles that we have there. That's just kind of where I'm at. And I don't know if that's shared with my other commissioners, but I just, I struggle with this.
Sure.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, just some thoughts on that. I am frustrated. You know, you said you didn't have gray hairs. I still had gray hair when this was approved, or I still had hair. Sorry, not gray. Watch the punchline there. But it's frustrating that ACHD is moving as slowly as it is on this. But I think there's two things that are keeping this to where I probably, you know, with some heartburn, am leaning toward a yes. One is that, you know, there is additional, you know, multifamily on this corridor and also schools on this corridor. Now there is the issue of inadequate service, but there's also the benefit of having, you know, more multifamily, more children closer to schools when you can consider the counter if someone's living here and has to live in multifamily housing, say a different spot in Meridian. You know, you're not really necessarily reducing, you know, reducing the strain on those schools in those areas. You're just shifting the load somewhere else. So if I'm looking at kind of a 30,000 foot level, I'm just trying to think in terms of for the good of the entire city, not just for this corridor. I still think that kind of edges out as a benefit of, we are growing out there. There are growing pains, and it's really frustrating to see ACG move so slowly on this. But I don't know that the answer is to shift that load to other corridors and other schools. They're also, frankly, kind of impacted because of the other side, the other issue I'm having, and this is the heartburn I would be having with voting no, is that in a sense we're saying because you took long to build this, we're going to make it take longer. And I start to get into a mindset of, well, and maybe not legally, but philosophically, how long before this kind of becomes a taking? We say this is a pretty good development, just not the right time, and in a year it's not the right time, and in 2 years it's not the right time. And I know that no one's recommending that, but there's kind of if we're saying this is roundabout's going to take forever, how long are we forcing this developer to kind of just sit with this? And I'm not comfortable having to hold them hostage to the whim. So I'm half kind of talking about my position, half thinking out loud. I don't know that I think probably where you are with, you're not quite comfortable with approving. I'm not quite comfortable voting no on it. I think for all its flaws, it does benefit the city as a whole. It does, kind of start to address the need for additional housing out there. And I don't know that we can. I don't know that I'm comfortable saying no just because they see.
Mr. Chairman, can I just interject about 2 minutes of some legal background, and I'll let you all continue your deliberations. I think it's an excellent discussion and exactly why we like to have citizens on our commissions, and you bring great insight. So excellent conversation. A couple of legal points I want the commission to be mindful of as you deliberate. One is we are sort of in a difficult spot in the sense that this project largely has most of its entitlements in place. We annexed the property some years ago. It has a development agreement that's been approved and is binding on both parties, and the property's been platted. So this property is far along in the process in terms of city entitlements, and that provides certain legal protections for the property owner. With that said, this is a conditional use permit, and the commission definitely does have the ability to place conditions on the project to mitigate impacts, but we don't have the ability to just simply say we don't like the project anymore, we don't want to do it. That really is not legally viable. And then related to that is my next point, and I'll be quiet and let you continue your deliberations, is that if, for argument's sake, the commission was inclined to deny the application, I just want the commission to be mindful that there are specific findings that you all make when you approve or deny a project that are required for conditional use permits. Those are in your staff report starting on page 23. You want to refer to those, but I would encourage you to just be mindful of the findings that you're required to make to approve or to deny. And then particularly if in a denial situation, articulate your reasons why you're denying, what those findings are going to be when you adopt them, why you're denying the project. And then also importantly, you need to provide the applicant with some information about how the project could be modified to address your concerns so that they could proceed with the project. So you need to tell them what they could do to fix their application essentially. So that's just some legal ideas I wanted to put on the table, and I'll let you all continue your deliberations.
Okay, thank you. I always appreciate anything you have to add. Keep us on track for sure. Commissioner Grace?
Mr. Chairman, the points I guess I would make are that we need the housing, the multifamily, the apartments. And so that's a big concern of mine. And it's been around, it's been in the process for a long time. I would ask somewhat rhetorically maybe, but what else are we gonna put there? What are our options? I understand the concerns about ACHD, but sort of in line with maybe what council was thinking. One of my points was simply the decision in front of us. And, I know we have some discretion in that regard, but it's a CUP in front of us and I guess I would ask if there are additional conditions that we think are reasonable and might help some of the concerns you have. I'm willing to listen to those. I am. I know it's probably a tough question off the top of your head right now, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm not unwilling to consider those and listen to those. A final point, just to Commissioner Smith, your sort of compromise. I like that. If we go down that road of approval, I do like the idea of giving them the choice to decide how they want to meet the parking requirements. So that's all. Thank you.
Well, and I want to say, I mean, this is of no fault of the developers. So honestly, I think, I mean, usually don't try and point fingers or, throw blame. But I mean, as a city, I think this is our problem that we've created. So, and the hesitation that I have, I mean, I understand that legally, basically, we have to approve this. So we can put some conditions in there. I mean, the parking, one or two spots isn't going to make a difference in my mind, one way or the other. So, and again, I think it's a quality multifamily development. And again, I have nothing against multifamily development, and I understand the need that we have. The one thing I will say on record, and we have shown that, again, with the application that was put in on the southeast corner of Black Cat and McMillan, that, we can't tell people that they can't develop, but I can't imagine that we will annex in anything else in this corridor until at least 2028. And I mean, the only thing that they're going to do is add a roundabout here, which to me is like putting a fire hose connector on the end of a garden hose. It just doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, you're going to let the traffic move faster. Great. That's awesome that they can move faster. I have a lot of heartburn with this, not necessarily this application, but just with that traffic corridor and what we're allowing to go in there. So again, it's not the applicant's fault at all, but it kind of speaks to where we're at as a community. And I mean, the need that we have is being generated by ourselves. So, I mean, I don't know that housing can get more expensive here. I would hope not. But I mean, everything that we deny just helps drive up the price because then the demand just gets higher. So I don't know. I just really struggle with where we're at. That the city itself is not in control of its own future as far as roads go. And we are just held hostage by ACHD in situations like this. So I don't know what we do about that.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lurcher, go ahead.
I agree. If this was a preliminary plat, it would be an easy denial, but the fact that it's been going on for so long, as legal said, you have to come up with a good reason for denial. And traffic is not one of them because it's something you can't modify or control. So I guess we've made our peace with public record. We don't like it. There's no fault for your development. I mean, it's taken 10 years and as the phases have come through, but like I said, I was on the fence, but I don't have a reason to deny it except for traffic, and that's not something he can fix.
I would agree with that.
Sure.
Mr. Smith, go ahead.
I'm gonna try to make a motion. And I'm like, I'll go with Commissioner Gray said if there. So After considering all public testimony, staff applicant and public testimony, I move to approve file number H-2023-0016 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of July 20th, 2023, with a modification to require the developer either add additional parking spaces for overflow parking or reduce the number of bedrooms to reach a ratio that is
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve file number H-2023-0016, Jump Creek South Apartments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I will be a nay on this still. But motion passes. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. And with that, I'd like to open the public hearing for file number H-2023-0033 for Stapleton Apartments. And we will begin with the staff report.
The applicant has submitted a conditional use permit for Stapleton Apartments. The site consists of 2.07 acres of land. It is currently zoned R15, located at the northwest corner of South Meridian Road and West Harris Street. History on the property is there currently is a development agreement that governs the property, and multiple phases of various final plats have already been approved. The comprehensive flume designation is medium high density residential. A two-story multifamily development containing 19 dwelling units consisting of 5 residential apartment buildings with a gross density of 9.18 units per acre, consistent with the density in the medium high density residential designation. The conceptual development plan included in the development agreement initially proposed 18 units on this lot, so they reduced it down to 19. However, the applicant believes that this location would be better served with larger units instead, and therefore reduce the number of total units, thereby increasing the square footage for each unit. The applicant's decision took into consideration the proximity of a larger future multifamily project planned directly to the west of the site. Because the site is only 2.07 acres, the total baseline area of qualified open space of 10% of the gross land for multifamily developments of 5 acres or more does not apply. In addition to the baseline open space requirement, a minimum area of outdoor common open space shall be provided based on the square foot of living area per the UDC. The applicant is required to provide common open space based on the square footage for each unit. The submitted plans did not depict the square footage for each unit for the 19 3-bedroom units. Staff recommends that the applicant revise the plans submitted with the future certificate of zoning compliance that meets this requirement. To satisfy the specific use standards for the 19 multifamily units, a minimum of 2 amenities, 1 from each category, must be provided. And according to the plans and narrative, the applicant has not provided any amenities within this development. So they do provide on-site storage with roll-up doors that can be counted. We just need to see floor plans for this, each unit, and how big those are. The buildings shall provide the minimum setbacks, and the site plan does comply with this for the multifamily development. The site plan depicts screen trash standards for only 1 trash enclosure provided for the multifamily development. Staff again recommends the applicant work with Republic Services to establish an approved location for the trash enclosures, as well as the adequate quantity that would be required for this development. A minimum of 80 square feet of private usable open space shall be provided for each unit. The requirement can be satisfied through porches, patios, decks, and other enclosed yards. Landscaping, entry, or other accessways shall not count toward this requirement. The submitted elevations depict several outdoor patios and balconies that may qualify for this requirement. However, without floor plans, staff cannot verify it. So we would like the applicant to submit floor plans with the certificate of zoning compliance so we can do the analysis to make sure that complies. This development complies with the dimensional standards for the R15 zoning district and the multifamily development. and the landscape buffers next to collector streets for the R15 zoning district. And also the height limit of 40 feet. They're depicting 35. All access was previously approved with the Stapleton preliminary plat. There are 2 primary accesses for this project that will occur on North Lone Pine Way via West Harris Street, which connect to South Meridian Road. There is an additional access through numerous roads in Stapleton subdivision. According to the development agreement, the applicant is required to provide an emergency vehicular connection between the site and the planned multifamily development to the west for interconnectivity, and they have shown that on their site plan to the southwest. Off-street parking for multifamily developments is required to be provided per the UDC based on the number of bedrooms per unit. The applicant is proposing 19 units consisting of all 19 being 3 bedrooms. In addition, there's 1 guest space for every 10 units is required per the UDC. Based on the total number of units and bedroom count distribution, a minimum of 59 parking spaces with a minimum of 19 of these spaces to be covered in a garage or by a carport. According to the submitted site plan, the applicant is proposing 58 spaces with 24 of these spaces to be covered by the carport. The proposed parking is short 1 stall for meeting the minimum code requirements. Staff is asking that they add that additional stall, and additionally plan for the deficient and trash enclosures for the site, which may impact the parking proposed, depending on what Republic Services comes back for. And there is also one bicycle parking space is required for every 25 proposed vehicle parking spaces. Based on the 59 spaces, a minimum of 2 are required, and they provided 4. Staff recommends that the applicant include an additional parking stall to meet the parking requirements and allocate additional parking spaces within close proximity to the development to accommodate the overflow needs for this development, and add a detail of the bicycle rack with the plan submitted for their certificate of zoning compliance application. Existing detached sidewalks along West Harris and Lone Pine Way connecting to the multifamily development. The applicant is proposing attached sidewalks and other pedestrian walkways throughout the entire site. Internal pedestrian walkways are required to be distinguished from vehicular driving services through the pavers of colored or scored concrete or bricks. And they shall be constructed with a different material than the driving surface with the plan submitted with the CZC. The landscape requirements for the street buffers are in compliance on the landscape plan. All fencing is also, the proposed fencing and existing fencing meet the requirements of the UDC code for this project. The applicant has submitted conceptual elevations for the future multifamily buildings. Multifamily residential projects also require administrative design review, so staff will perform the thorough analysis at that time. And they will also be required to submit a certificate of zoning compliance that requires to be submitted for the entire development for us to analyze as well, based off of the conditional use permit conditions. And staff also wanted to add that the roll-up doors adds a valuable amenity to this developed to the rear of these buildings. We haven't seen that before, so we thought that was kind of neat. In addition, the conceptual elevations depict buildings with various roof lines and materials, including stone, horizontal lap siding, vertical board, batten siding, stained wood, and fenestration. Written testimony, we had 1 written testimony by Stacy Cable on concerns with cut through traffic in neighborhoods exceeding 25 miles an hour, safety due to drivers making left turns from Harris Road onto Meridian Road without a traffic light. And then staff does recommend approval with the conditions listed in the staff's report, and staff stands for any questions.
Thank you very much. The applicant like to come forward? Good evening, sir. Need your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. David Ruby, 499 Main, Boise, Idaho. Thank you for taking the time to hear me tonight. Here for the Stapleton Apartments. I'm here to present questions about the multifamily aspect. As you know, the single family subdivision is been approved and is under construction. Most of the homes are going in. Our goal, or this all started back with an annexation and rezone with case number H2018-1029. Our goal tonight is to obtain approval for a conditional use permit. The next steps in the process would be submittal of design review and CCC applications, which we're working on. And then following that, we will submit plans for a building permit, building plan review. This project is for 19 units. I believe the original approval was 24, 28, but as staff mentioned, in the time frame that has elapsed and doing a market study with that large project nearby, they've opted to proceed with only 3-bedroom units because they felt that was the greatest need in that area right now. So that is what we are showing for. So it's 19 units total in 5 2-story buildings. The buildings are designed to be similar both in height and overall mass with other rural neighborhoods that are around. The materials, roof lines and whatnot are very similar to those homes. We have reviewed the staff report and we are in agreement with all conditions of approval in that report. We will update various drawings as requested in our upcoming design review and CCC application. There are only 2 conditions that I just want to touch on briefly, and then I'll keep it short. Condition A-3 or A.3.f amenities. Over the past day or so, we've been in communication with staff, and I think between my client and other planners involved in the overall Stapleton project, my understanding coming here tonight was that we are basically in agreement with providing 2 amenities, one of which is the storage shed that Stacy mentioned. The other, and I just realized I didn't bring a thumb drive with a drawing of it, but the plan that was up there, the site plan, and you can't really see it, but on the very right hand corner of that site that's almost touching the title block there's actually a dog park another dog park that was put in with phase 1 that was not part of the previous requirements. The other one was so popular, they added another one, and it's my understanding, maybe staff could comment on that they've discussed that and that would be amenable to them. If that is the case, we're completely in agreement with that. The other condition is A3E open space. I just wanted to comment that the patios are in fact large enough to meet the common open space or the private open space requirement. And then I've double checked it and I will do an exhibit that shows that we do have adequate space on site for the common open space as well. So with that, I'll stand with questions.
Commissioners, do we have any questions of the applicant or staff?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Smith, go ahead.
just question for Stacy if she could comment on the discussion of the dog part and any staff thoughts, considerations on that.
Chair, members of the commission, yes, the applicant and I had a discussion this afternoon about that, and we did discuss this topic with the chair as well as we deliberated as we got prepared for tonight's hearing. So there's some gray area here for sure, and just like the legal counsel tells you, it is this conditional use permit. So this is your opportunity to say, okay, do you find that a dog park on the adjacent from the property meets the intent of the code, or do you want to physically see 2 amenities on this particular development? When Stacy and I looked at the record, it was very clear to us that although conceptually multifamily was approved here, it was still required that it would go through a conditional use process, and we would analyze open space and amenities and parking at that time and the design, which I think the applicant's done a pretty good job here. I really like what they've done with it. I like the fact that they also reduced the number of units. I think it fits in better with the character of the neighborhood. So that's the other caveat that we're not privy to, Stacy and I aren't, and the city in general, is there are CCNRs out there that govern this particular property. And in those CCNRs, it's apparent that these are shared. They're joined together as one development. So that's something that at least we want to put on the record, then inform you that, yes, although this site doesn't have the 2 required amenities, it has 1. There are amenities in this subdivision that are above what code required at the time that it came in, along with the open space. So again, that's kind of your purview tonight. Do you want to see more amenities on this site? We're in agreement with the applicant. I think he's going to have plenty of open space with the 19 units here. No doubt about that. So it really comes down to whether or not you guys are comfortable with the CCNRs and that the 2 developments are married together and joined and sharing in all the open space and amenities. Because if I lived in Stapleton and there was an amenity, obviously the amenity for these apartments won't be used by these neighbors if they're here to testify on that, because it's storage for the apartment renter. So that's something that you have to take under consideration when you look at this. Yes, although it's all integrated and meant to be one development, there's really no benefit for the single family home owners to go to the multifamily development because there's nothing for them to share. So that's something to take into account when you look at a dog park across the street. Yes, can that work? I think it can work. I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with the CCNR language. But again, it's whether this is a conditional use permit. We have people here that may feel differently, but certainly just wanted to go on the record and share that conversation with you.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Archer.
Dave, you mentioned there was annexation and rezone. How long has this project been in the works?
The number says 2018 as a part of that. So I'm assuming.
Okay, so 2018, and are all the single family homes already built?
No, there's, the neighbors probably can attest better than me. About half of
About
them.
half. So
Not
you're
even.
like,
It looked pretty empty when I went out there
so you have another phase to go for single family houses,
too. Yeah,
2 or
I
3.
believe so. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, just curious. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Commissioner Grace.
Chairman, Dave, I just had a question about the storage units. Can you just elaborate a little bit on the storage units and what those are and
If you, Stacy or Bill, would you mind going to one of the exterior elevations? They're attached to the backs of the units and they have a roll-up door, a lot like people would have out the back of their garage to their yard. Can you zoom in on any of that? Is that possible or is that high tech? The bottommost elevation that you're seeing is the rear.
Yeah.
You can kind of see the door. They're fairly large. So they are per unit, right attached, right next to their patios.
And then if I'm mischaracterizing this, tell me, but for lack of a better way to say it, are you getting credit for the second amenity for something that's already there?
That's one way to put it. And I guess I'm going to bring it up now, even though I wasn't going to, because staff and I had a disagreement and we have a staff attorney here. So I'd love to know what the true legal basis is. Because as someone on the outside of that world, I'm the architect. I read through the development agreement, which told me which amenities the entire development had to have. It specifically told me how I calculate parking for a multifamily development, told me all of that. That was a few years ago. So when I'm going through it, the difference in opinion we had is, do you ignore all that that's in a legally binding development agreement, or to use the current recently updated parking counts, open space calculations, that sort of thing? Does that trump a legally binding development agreement? Which the reason I bring that up is because all the amenities were supposed to be shared. And so we wouldn't have to provide any. That's my point. So we opted to not try to pick a fight about that language with staff. And when they had those discussions about the amenities the shared dog park being something they just voluntarily built. And it sounded like staff was okay with that. Let's proceed with that. So I wasn't even going to bring that up, but to answer your question, because I'm not trying to, that kind of sounds bad when we're like, oh yeah, we're trying to take credit for something that's already there. But
So in my mind, I can understand what you're saying then, that it was your understanding that it would be a shared amenity and you could use it in this nature, in this way.
probably the better way is, it was my understanding that we were required to provide 0 amenities. They were already required as a part of the development agreement, which we did. This multifamily lot was not required to provide any more. And it didn't say provide them per the UDC for multifamily standards. It lumped everything together. If that makes any sense, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
No, thank
Well,
you.
yeah, and I mean, as we go through this, and that's might be something that we work on in the code to better structure that. But generally speaking, especially when we see something like multifamily, we want it to stand on its own. I mean, I'm just, you know.
And I don't disagree with that, Mr. Chairman,
right.
but what is confusing is it doesn't just say meet the parking requirements for, and I'm using parking because it's more detailed. It literally says, this is how you calculate it. And it doesn't follow that paragraph. And this is the development agreement I'm talking about, with language that says, or as modified in the future. It's a contract. So is everything else.
Okay.
So, and I think it's a difference of the world I'm working in day to day versus city
Sure.
staff, right? They're reading it through their lens. I'm reading it through mine. But I would love to know truthfully, because it is no fun
Well,
being told you didn't provide amenities when you thought you did what you were supposed to do. We're not trying to get out of anything. We're just,
yeah, and I mean, I can't speak to it legally, but I mean, as I look at this piece of property, I would hope that you would be able to enjoy amenities without having to cross the street.
well,
That's my
the
point
true
to
goal
it.
of this is it's not a big multifamily that just happens to be out on the street in front of a subdivision. It's part of this neighborhood. It's just as both ways. I mean, it's very small. I mean, if it was bigger, we'd probably have a pool that could be shared. It's not, it's 19 units.
Mhm.
So
Okay. Bill, do you want to offer anything? I mean, you know, I would like to hear the other, you know, or more information on that as far as how the legality of the DA or Kurt. I mean, if you want to pile in on that, I'm more than fine hearing from either one of you, because I am not an expert in this.
I'm happy to chime in on some of that topic, and then Kurt, if he wants to weigh in on it, he can do that as well. So that's where I think staff and the applicant are in agreement. It's gray. And that's because when you guys approved or recommended approval, or the city approved Stapleton in 2018, the concept plan showed 28 multifamily units.
Mhm.
As part of our review of the annexation, and we had to make findings, how do we get them compliant with the density requirements of the comprehensive plan? We worked with the applicant. They threw on this token multifamily development to try to increase the density on the particular property. And they weren't ready to submit a conditional use permit at that time. So when staff analyzes that, and you see that in the body of the staff report, it's this generalities. It's not thou shalt do this. When we're looking at it, we're like, keep in mind when you come forward, think about these things. Parking is, open space and parking always drives the design for multifamily. And I know David can attest to that because he does a lot of projects in this valley for this. He's got the niche on this, so he understands our standards very well. In this particular case, and this is what I've told the developer, is you got caught where you had an entitlement and then code changed. So right now, as an example, we have a screen here in front of you. When we look at it, it says very clearly to us that everything will be evaluated with a future conditional use permit. However, when I go to the development agreement, all it says is you need a conditional use permit. It didn't say you need to comply with the specific use standards. So that's where I can side with both the applicant and I can side with us saying, yeah, we weren't specific enough to say that the multifamily development needs to do X, Y, and Z. All we did was conceptually approve it for a multifamily development in the future. And now we're here tonight to debate or arbitrate what we think is appropriate. So looking at the letter of the law, if that's why I said, if you feel like the intent was there and the intent was always there to integrate these two things, then that's one thing. But again, it's a conditional use permit and it's your purview if you still feel to make it in the best interest of the community to have additional amenities for this development. That's your purview tonight. So that's why we really put it on you. I'm comfortable. That's why I said I'm comfortable either way. All of the amenities in a residential subdivision, you have to walk to them unless you live right next to them, right? So again, that was the intent here. Yes, is it a perfect situation? No. But I think all of us are learning, kind of going through this and saying, we need to reevaluate that, because if we truly wanted something different, then we truly should have said we wanted the multifamily to have its own amenities and open space.
Okay.
And to your point, they really should stand alone, but it should still integrate. So that's, again, and then just the fact that the CCNRs showed that that integration did occur. I think there's kind of, I can see it both ways, I guess. And that's why I say it's gray. And that's why we'll leave it up to you guys on how you guys want to go with it. But to me, it was always one development, and they added it at the request of staff to make sure that we got additional density. And the fact that they reduced the density, and again, I think they're trying to, again, help integrate that a little bit better into the community.
Okay, I appreciate that, Bill.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Orchard, go ahead.
So if the conversation is revolving around amenities as a standalone multifamily development of 19 units, is your client amiable of putting in a tot lot and a dog park to be able to accommodate so that those things are withholding? I mean, you have plenty of space since you went from 28 units to 19. So there should be plenty of open space to be able to have even though the community is integrated with the entire thing. But if I'm in a unit at the front of the development and the dog park is all the way at the other end, it might be not necessarily a challenge, but it would be inconvenient. But if there was something closer where all the buildings clustered, then I feel like, well, now I'm part of my little community in front, even though I'm part of a bigger one. Does that make sense? So is your client would be amiable to possibly putting in a couple more amenities?
Madam Commissioner, you put me in a tough spot. My client, when I shared the staff report, is completely adamant that this was all agreed upon up front. And I'm trying to walk a finer line, a more compromising line, because his memory and his stance of being a part of it was, and he told me this from day one, actually, and I think I brought it up in the pre-app, is because I thought it was strange. No amenities, no open space, right? Because that's, as Bill said, that's where I start. And so and to answer your question specifically, I could put a token tot lot, but I couldn't fit a real amenity with the open space that I have to get, even though we did reduce the numbers. Because I did that calculation yesterday, drew them out, and it eats up the space pretty good, actually. Just a little comment on I guess part of his adamant, the reason he's so adamant about that is he was like, well, why do we have a DA then? Because that's from a developer standpoint, and I'm not a developer, I'm just an architect, but it helps mitigate some of their risk. It takes some of the unknowns away so that as they move forward, and it's not black and white, because obviously that's like the last project, times change and you have to adapt a little bit, but some of the risk goes away. That's kind of the question, is which one?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
Two questions. One, to make sure. So as I'm understanding, the previous development, there are 2 dog parks. Those are 2 amenities.
So in the Mr. Commissioner, in the phase, I don't know which phase, but in the single family subdivision, I understand there's a large dog park and then I think it's a half-acre community park with tot lot, climbing dome. There's a whole list. It's a pretty substantial park, and it's also fenced. Yeah, there's a basketball court, and I was told to make sure to mention that it's fenced so that parents can sit with their kids and not worry about them just darting out into the road. But those were not, that's the only reason I can kind of in good conscience even come up and propose that, is it was not part of those amenity package at all. I don't know if it was a corner, just happened to be right across from this that was available. I'm sorry, I don't know the history of that as well.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is, I didn't want to confirm, I believe I heard Stacy here, this is part of, there are additional phases expected, or is there additional, like a larger multifamily development?
Not, Mr. Commissioner, not in Stapleton, I believe.
This is the larger-
Yes. These 19 units are the large, I mean, as we're all growing, it's to our west. I believe there's plans for a much larger.
That's not.
No, has nothing, no, different client, different everything.
That was my concern, was less the way that I was thinking was less about we're kind of straddling the line here, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to be, okay, there's another 19 units, and then, well, that's what's included. Now that was my
No.
concern. So,
No, sir.
okay,
no.
thank you. That helps.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if I could just let you know, also, Mr. Ruby doesn't know all the entitlements out there, but and some of you are newer commissioners and you don't know all the history out there either, but you're correct. There is a 200+ unit multifamily development that's potentially could come down the road in the future. And then as part of those residential developments that have been approved in that section, the developer was required to give a certain amount of land towards dedication of a city park in that area. So I just wanted to put that out there too, that there will be a public amenity out there for the residents to use, and that will come in the future when those developments start happening and final plats come in and those pieces get put together and the park gets built out there. But I think it was can't remember if it's a neighborhood park or a community park, but I think pretty nice amenity happening in the future.
I think I heard about that in the pre-app too. Yeah, much larger.
Quick question for staff. Lone Pine Way, that's ACHD's road, correct?
Mr. Chair, yes, that is.
And to be honest, the only heartburn, and I get it, that, I mean, different parts of subdivisions share all the amenities and everything, but we've had issues in the past where people have to cross a busy road to get from, where they live to their amenities. So, and where this is, the entire thing is basically on the entrance and exit to the subdivision. I hesitate for the safety of people that have to cross that street in order to get to the, to the different amenities that are there. So is there something that can be done in order to help mitigate that? And I pose that question to staff and the applicant as well, as far as, can there be a signalized crossing put in there or something along those lines? So, when kids, families, mom's pushing strollers or dad's pushing strollers for that matter, want to go over and enjoy, the park-like setting that's over there, can they get there safely?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, my only comment would be, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but I think majority of the houses in the subdivision will have to go further to go to any park or dog park, and these folks to walk to that one dog park, if that's kind of where we're focusing. And crossing streets, I mean, I think one of the things that we didn't do because we couldn't, because the fence was already up, but Caleb was actually asking for a connection north to that future city park, which there probably will be a crosswalk of some kind at some point, but nobody knows when that's coming and the fence is already built. So we were trying to focus everything inward. I, as the applicant and his agent, don't have the authority to agree to put a tot lot on here. You definitely do have the authority to require that if that's what you think we need to do. I just can't. He's told me, I asked him, what stance do you want me to take? And he firmly believes that the DA did not require any of that and that it can't be added at this point.
Okay. I find it interesting. He's willing to die on his sword for something like that, but at the same time, I get it. So.
And I I probably should be quiet because I shouldn't be putting words in his mouth. I don't know if it was email and text discussion, so.
Okay,
he's traveling.
Mr. Chairman,
right ahead.
I'm getting the sensation that we may hear from opinions from neighbors. And before we do that, I wanted to ask you, what kind of conversations, if any, are you aware of that have occurred, whether related to the amenity in particular or anything else from your perspective?
Mr. Commissioner, I received 2 emails out of the letters that we had sent out. I think they were both from neighbors of the subdivision that's north and a little bit west. And they had really nothing to do with amenities or unit count. It was just all about traffic, just issues with traffic, which again, I plead the fifth a little bit. I don't know that area as well. I spent more time out there during the neighborhood meeting just to try to get familiar with it. But there was nothing about amenities and I have not heard anything since.
Nothing further. I think we'll move on to public comment portion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Joy, do we have anybody signed up?
Mr. Chair, we do. Let's start with Mary Scheller.
Good evening. We'll need your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Mary Scheller. My address is 4220 South Chesman Avenue. I'm one of the residents in the Stapleton community. My husband and I bought our home in August of 2022. We liked the neighborhood as it was quiet. Currently, there's a lot of construction traffic, but once that stops, the only traffic in the community would be from homeowners and visitors to the homeowners. There is a nice community park. This was the appeal for us to buy a Black Rock home in a community where we did. We were never informed, nor was it disclosed to us prior to buying our property that there was going to be a multifamily apartment building in our subdivision. We had that been the case, we would not have bought in that, we wouldn't have bought our home there. If you look up the Stapleton community, it states the following. Black Rock Homes, Stapleton embodies a nice mix of highly sought after 2-story and single-family homes in Meridian, Idaho, featuring a community park with open space and playground, community dog park, walking paths, centrally located with great access to the interstate. The plat maps that we looked at when we bought the property has 4 phases. We are in the first phase. They are just now starting the second phase. So they have phase 2, they have phase 3, and they have phase 4 to go. And that doesn't even include this multifamily development. We did not see that on our plat maps. This was the original plat map that I did look up because I noticed on the information that the homeowners all shared with one another. This is the original plat map. This does not, in the common man looking at this, does not show anything about a multifamily apartment complex. It also, if you look up this Stapleton community, currently it shows you the plats available, which again, doesn't show the multifamily. This one, I just pulled up. This one is from July 8th. Today is the 20th, so 12 days ago. Again, this looks like, this is where I'm guessing that the multifamily apartment complex is supposed to go. But to us, the common person, this looks like trees and landscaping. It doesn't show anything, and it was never disclosed to us that it's supposed to be a multifamily unit there. Now, we did get the CCNRs after we signed all of the final paperwork. And we went around to our neighbors And this many people signed that, again, had they known that there was going to be a multifamily building there, they would not have bought. Or they would have, they're voting no to do the multifamily complex, because there are literally two ways in our subdivision. You come in off of Meridian Road, and then we happen to live right here. And if you go, you have to go up this road, and this is where the multifamily unit's going to be. So this is one exit, and the other exit is right here. You have literally two exits. All the rest are residential streets. And where they want to put this multifamily, the dog park, right here is where they want to put the multifamily unit. Right here is the dog park, and right next to that is the community park. So if they're doing three.
Ma'am, you'll need to wrap up here pretty quick.
Okay, if they're doing 3 bedrooms, those families with those little kids are going to be walking all the way down here just to go to the park. So I would say vote no on it, and you're going to hear from a lot of other homeowners who are going to tell you the same thing, because we were never informed that that was in there. Yes, it could have been in the CCNRs, like he said, but we didn't get those until after we already signed the final paperwork. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a Natalie. And I won't even try your last name, sorry.
Memory. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone, Mr. Commissioner, committee members, staff. My name is Natalie Knighton. I am a new resident in the Stapleton community.
What's your address, ma'am?
I'm sorry?
We'll need your address, ma'am.
Oh, 4193 South Chessman, right next to Mary.
Thank you.
So this developer sounds like a gem.
Ma'am, can you speak into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said the developer sounds like a gem. So I appreciate David coming and falling on the sword for him. So I stand before you today strongly opposing this multi-family unit complex in our peaceful housing unit. While I understand the need for urban development and this particular project, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to wear my old lady glasses. This particular project poses significant concerns that we cannot afford to ignore. First and foremost is the addition of this complex undoubtedly will lead to increased traffic congestion, as you heard Mary say. If you're not familiar with our road, you should go out and try to pull out on Meridian Road. You take your life into your own hands, okay? It's pretty uncomfortable.
People in the
So-
audience can keep their comments down. Thank you.
So it also compromises our safety. So there are 2 exits, as Mary said. The first one coming out on Harris, we can turn left at our own risk. And the second one, we cannot turn left. We have to go up and make a U-turn. So imagine adding another 59 cars plus to that process. Very congested. So really, this is going to create a tremendous traffic jam and also be humanly treacherous. Moreover, a construction project with a complex like this will have adverse effects on our environment. In addition to the concrete and the infrastructure, it will disturb the aesthetic balance as described in the homeowners website about where we live and why we bought here. Furthermore, and it allowing the complex next to our housing development would significantly lower our property values, as you all know. I'm interested in how many of you have a complex in your communities, or how many of you would purchase your home in a community if you had known, as we did not, that this was coming. Of course, David and probably many of you would have been smart enough to know where to find that information, but we were not, and it was never mentioned. So as a personal testimony, I don't know if you're familiar with Hazelwood Village, but I just sold a beautiful home there. Do you know why? Because they put a multifamily apartment complex in. Okay, I sold my home and I love my home. So I was sick to my stomach when I heard this. Our housing development was built with a vision of fostering a close-knit and serene community. In addition, the larger complex might disrupt this harmony and potentially leading to noise disturbance, privacy issues, and a sense of overcrowding. I am curious about what the study is on crime increasing as well, because I'm certain, as I heard in my other neighborhood, I live kitty corner to a policeman who told his 10-year-old daughter she could no longer walk alone in our neighborhood when the apartment complex came in. Okay, so you might look at us, a lot of us have gray hair. We came here to Sunset, right? So we're not very thrilled about having to share our community with folks who may come in from a larger city, may not respect our peace and our values here. So there's certainly a need for housing in our community. But had we known, I personally and many of us here would not have purchased our home, put our life savings into this development. I want to retire here. If this passes, I will reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Georgia. Thank you. Timer on here.
Good evening, ma'am. We'll need your name and address for the record. If you just want to grab the microphone and speak into it, please.
Georgia Conkley, 3790 South Lone Pine Avenue. I'm a resident of Oakwood. I'm here to give you a reality check. I don't know if any of you live in this area. It's very dangerous to make a left-hand turn on Meridian Road. It's a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. Most people go 60 and 65. The only access, we've already heard, is to Meridian. There's also another one, if they back up and they go down Kentucky Way, which is our area. And I'm up at 6 o'clock. I'm out of my house at 6:30. I swim every morning for an hour. I have to go, if I go straight down Victory and I want to make a left turn with a light, I have to take my life in my hands because people just run through the red lights on Meridian Road. It's standard. If I'm the first car, I give it 10 seconds before I hit my gas to make sure that I can get across free. I go on Stoddard Road up to Overland, and it's a bigger cross, and I still give it 10 seconds. I come back to my house about 8:15 in the morning. The traffic on Meridian Road is so backed up. People have to wait for 2, sometimes 3 lights to get through a light going north and south. It's not even giving those people a chance to get out. And I had another point. I'm sorry, I'm 78. I'm losing my thoughts. I'm totally against this because our area is a very sweet, quiet area. It's a wonderful place to live. Everybody gets along. There's no hassles. We help our neighbors out. And I don't want to be really negative about apartment dwellers. I was one for some times in my life, but they don't have the homeowner spirit. And they don't take care of things the way homeowners do. Yeah, you've got landscapers, but you've also got people who don't watch their kids necessarily. And you've got people going on a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit going 30 and 35. That's on Kentucky Way, where I have to make my right turn to get down to Victory Street. It's going to be crazy. They're building another, what they said they were going to build between 140 and 200 homes west of Stapleton. How are we even going to get our cars out? It's crazy. I urge you to vote no on this, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ruth Brogdon.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioner, staff, and attendees. Before you start my time, I did have one house cleaning thing I'd like to ask. If we had a technical difficulty where we had a lot of other people that would have come here if they knew they could not attend by Zoom, who really wanted to share their concerns with you this evening. And many couldn't make last minute, I've already had texts, couldn't make last minute childcare, et cetera, because our technical things did not work. So I would implore you, besides my comments, to at least give them an opportunity to email after this hearing, because they are disenfranchised by not being able to speak when they had planned to. But we understand you had some technical difficulties. But I don't think we can just say, well, if you can't get down here, they may not even be able to hear you. They may not be able to get on to even listen. And you don't have any phone lines open now. So I would just ask that that would be the fair thing to do, number one. Number two, my name is S. Ruth Brogdon. I am a resident at 103 West Norwich Street. I purchased my home just in March. As you've already heard, we saw a Stapleton block that looked like no one ever said a word Stapleton Apartments. I've never heard it before. I wouldn't even know now. None of us ever received letters. We never received any postcards. What we saw this week or last week was a posting by somebody on our mailboxes that said, did you know this is happening? Here's information, go look on the city site. That's how we found out about it. So that's a concern. Also, as you've already heard, I'm concerned about this approved permit in 2018, because what I also heard is that you're able, because you did not have a new open space study or traffic design, it was a conceptual idea, that you would have the right to say no to this, from what I can see. Also, I purchased based on the plans that I saw that didn't show any kind of apartment buildings, no Staples. We have a name of Stapleton, which are homes. And now there's going to be Stapleton's going to be known as these, all these apartments and things. So that was another thing. Has there been an updated traffic flow study for all of these apartment conditions? When was the last traffic study done? You've already heard, I have never seen anything like trying to turn left there on Harris or trying to go through all the construction. I already have 2 brand new tires with holes in them, trying to go through the back construction way as she's talking about down Kentucky. Either way, you're taking your life in your hands because you can't even get through that street. And we don't have, like we've already said, we have hardly any of our single family homes finished in the other phases. We haven't even gotten to these multiple, and how do we know how many cars will be coming out of there? How many drivers will be in each 3-bedroom unit, et cetera? So none of this was explained to us. The other thing is my concern also is that the light is desperately needed somewhere there. And here's the thing I heard you on the last conditional use permit. So we make a plan 10 years ago or 5 years ago here. We don't have the street structure in process yet, or we don't know whether it's going to be. But of course, you're approving a future plan and you don't know what the situation is going to be. All these homes that are built out already going out, and you have to get through these lights on. But then you're going to say, well, this developer, for whatever reason, we didn't have COVID in 2014. We didn't have COVID in 2018. So for whatever reason, they get to just wait 10 or 20 years and say, hey, we get the old plan. We get to go by that traffic, not by the reality of what the citizens are living through now. And we haven't got to here yet. So that's another issue. If the planners made these decisions on prior traffic patterns, how can you not make them update these plans now and go through another process? The last thing is, we bought these things with a builder and with what we could see.
which was not this apartment situation. And so now we've paid our money, and we count on you, the commissioners, we count on you to find an alternative area without these existing approved plans that we were not privy to protect our property values, protect our traffic situation and safety. We would ask that you say no to this conditional use permit. We appreciate that this is not good use of land when you're going to further impede traffic and cause many more issues. I noticed that also it was
Ma'am.
said that technology issues weren't addressed. So I would like to ask you to vote no. And I would also like to know, we keep talking about this person. What's the name of the client? We should be able to know who that is. What builder? We have a lot of builders out there. What's the name of the builder that is wanting to do this and did not share this information with us? Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Stevens.
I am Linda Stevens and I live at 3900 South Lone Pine Avenue. And I wanted to also, not to beat a dead horse, but the road infrastructure. I'm always wondering why builders do not get permits for the infrastructure when they build homes. At the end of Harris Road, there are 200 KBH homes going in there, and that's in back of Stapleton. I know that Stapleton has about 100 homes, so that's 300 homes that go in and out of Harris Street, which is only a 2-lane road. And at least everybody I know has at least 2 cars, so that's 600 additional cars already that are going to be going back and forth on Harris Road. Needless to say, with more Stapleton apartments and more townhouses going in, it just increases the traffic so much. I also wanted to address the, it seems silly, the dog park issue on Stapleton. I'm well aware that the people that live in Stapleton, and no offense to any of you, they bring their dogs over to our dog park, which is clearly for our subdivision. They let their dogs run rampant and they do not pick up dog stuff. So an additional dog park would only be great, but when you addressed earlier, Mr. Seal, about your traffic concerns about the project that at Jump Creek that was approved 10 years ago, I just can't imagine the traffic. And I wish that ACHD would have to approve building permits before they allowed builders to put 200 and 300 homes in when there's not adequate road to go in and out. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk,
There's no one else signed up, sir.
who else would like to come up and testify? Sir? Good
Hello,
evening.
everyone. My name is Mitchell Johnson. I live at 162 West Hannigan Street in the Stapleton community. First, thank you so much for staying so late this evening to hash this out. I've lived there since March, like my neighbor there. And like them, I only heard of this Monday of this week. When we were buying, none of this was mentioned. Nothing like this was disclosed when they were describing the future plans of the community. They told us about phase 1 that was finished, phase 2, 3, and 4 that were coming up. And like my neighbors said, they're currently in the beginning of phase 2. I was looking at the Stapleton plat map for available lots. Currently, the map shows this area of land, but it is not labeled as any kind of future development. It's totally blank, so to speak, which in my mind would lead potential buyers to believe that nothing will actually be there unless, some sort of notice was given. 200 houses are planned in this area. Probably 30 to 40 are built right now. So that's potentially, 70 more buyers who, under the status quo, would not be aware of this upcoming development that's planned. I understand that, the builders and developers have an incentive to, maintain house values so they can sell. And currently, since our community is still under development, the developer is still head of the HOA board, which is fine, but they already nitpick on very minor things that we do to our houses in order to maintain their image, maintain house values, which fine. But the fact that they are not disclosing this development to people gives them an unfair advantage during the buying process for negotiation, right? They can keep the house prices high without us knowing what's going to go in next door. Empirically, vicinity to apartments does drive house prices down. Had we known about this, like my neighbors, we would have absolutely thought twice about buying in this neighborhood. Especially given that, we're in an era of record house prices for this valley, and they're likely not going to go back down much, probably going to go much higher. So I don't want to accuse anyone of deliberate deception, but this is very concerning to me as, a longtime resident of this valley and a new resident of the Stapleton community. I think the traffic issue has been addressed quite thoroughly. I would like to know if there is a recent traffic study, especially if it accounts for the 70 more houses in Stapleton and probably about 170 more houses in Stapleton, as well as KB Homes. And also, why was it not mentioned or labeled in the Stapleton plat so that people could see, what are you planning with this community that the developer clearly owns together, especially if it was planned initially in 2018 and they're planning to share amenities with the community that is clearly labeled with the community that is not labeled on the map. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, there's no one else online,
Okay.
but may I add to the record that if people would like to get the comment on record in the file, they can email us at comment@meridiancity.org.
Okay, thank you. Pam?
Karen Helms.
Before we just,
Hello, I'm
thank you.
Karen Helms. I live at 469 West Oak Springs Drive in Oakwood Estates. Our house backs up to Harris Road, which is where the apartments are going to be. So they're going to be directly across from my backyard. And I guess I wasn't planning on talking tonight, so I don't have anything to read from, but I can tell you that I've lived there for 5 years in Oakwood. I did attend the meeting when Stapleton was being discussed, and I don't remember anything being said about apartments. And if that were the case, I probably would have sold my house by now because they're going to be right behind me on Harris Road. And we had to put in, felt like we've had to put in security cameras now because of the apartments being leased, not being owned. And I guess traffic trying to get off of Harris Road onto Meridian, we're right in between Victory Road and Amity. And those have stoplights. So I can't imagine anyone approving another stoplight at Harris because, that would be 3 very close stoplights in a row, but it's extremely dangerous to try to get out and make a left turn onto Meridian. People are flying down Meridian Road to Cuna, and that traffic is it's practically nonstop to try to get out onto Meridian Road now and make left. And I guess other main thing I just wanted to say is that when you buy in a community that's houses, you don't expect there to be an apartment complex. I think when you buy or lease in an apartment complex and there's other apartments around you, you expect that and everybody's there for the same reason. But when you buy in a subdivision like we did and all the people who live in Stapleton right now, you just I just don't believe that's a place to stick apartments. It should stay houses. And as you all discussed in the previous review, to give an alternative is to just put more houses there. I understand the builder wants to make money and they want to pack in as many people and units as they can. But I think to preserve our community and Stapleton and all the other subdivisions that are going in right around us, it should just stay homes. Single story and second story homes. I mean, it's the only thing that I feel is appropriate to be there.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Good evening. Thank you so much for staying and hashing this out with us. Like they had said earlier, my name is Camille Rogers. I live at 4253 South Chessman Avenue. I'm a resident at Stapleton. I was not planning on talking either, but I did want to mention that it was not disclosed. I am hearing now it's in the CCRs. I probably should have read that better, but it was not disclosed when we bought our homes. I too probably would not have bought in the subdivision. But what I really wanted to touch on is I am a first responder here. I've been a first responder for 20 years, and I have a huge concern for the traffic. There are already a lot of accidents on Meridian Road as is. And to turn off of Harris, what people haven't mentioned is across Meridian Road. There's also another street that turns onto Meridian. You can turn, it goes into another subdivision. So if you pull out into the median, and I have seen this happen numerous times, other cars coming to turn there are in that wanting to turn left into their subdivision as we're trying to turn left out onto Meridian Road. I have a huge concern for the accidents that can occur. We have to go through a subdivision to get to Victory to be able to use the light. And as they said, people do U-turns at Amity, but Amity is not a U-turn signal. So again, it's there, the traffic there is very dangerous. So thank you for your time. That's all I really wanted to address.
Thank you very much. Ma'am, run up. Good evening. Just need your name and
Good
address. for the record.
evening, honored commissioners and also honored guests. I didn't plan anything either, but you can ditto me on all those people that spoke.
And we'll need your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Charmaine Helms, 469 West Oak Springs Drive. I'm Karen's mother. So I've lived there since 18 also. I have only two issues. One would be the apartments look right down in my bedroom. Of course, I could keep my shades closed, but then I like to see some sunlight and I like to see the yard. So that's one issue, because we're right there where those apartments are going, right in our backyard. Secondly, Harris Street. That's gonna be a bugger. When I'm laying in bed watching TV every weekend, I can hear all the hot rods, all the racers on Harris Street. Now, I could just imagine they must think that's a speedway or something. I can imagine when there are so many more people and apartments, what that's gonna be like. It's just like living in a roadway, a speedway. So that's all I have to say. And I ditto everything all these great people have said.
Thank you very much. Sir. Evening.
Good evening. My name's Steel Stone and I'm at 443 West Oak Springs Drive. After listening to everybody's concerns here, they pretty much said everything that I was going to say. I took some notes and kind of wanted to just add some additional points to each one of the topics, trying not to stress too much on them anymore. Obviously, traffic is a continuing thing you're hearing on Harris Road, knowing that the ACHD with the other developments, KB Homes, L2, Stapleton, and I believe one or other development builders all jointly had to allocate money to improve Harris. ACHD just completed that last year-ish. At that time, they widened the road. They put sidewalks all the way down, but they did absolutely nothing to address the fact that there is no safe way to get onto Meridian Road in the 4 hours in the morning when there's heavy traffic and the 4 hours in the evening when they're not there. So as a condition that you would potentially put on them to improve with a street light to help mitigate this issue, it's probably not going to happen given that they just redid the entire Harris Road. So I just wanted to put that out there as that's probably not going to be something that can be fixed in any timely manner. As several of the people in Stapleton here that have represented, they've been misled. I've actually, since my home is actually, if you can go to the plat that shows the actually a little bit more of Harris, my house is directly behind the entrance of Stapleton. I'm probably the most impacted home when it comes to traffic, which we know is going to be hundreds of cars over the next 3 years as this gets finished and then KB Homes right behind it gets finished as well. So so yeah, that's it. Misled on having this multifamily complex here. I want to be the bad person in the room and say that I did find in 2021 the claim that they actually were going to put multifamily homes there. And I did see a preliminary plat, but then when I tried to pull it up in the last year and a half, it has been removed and it went to this blank spot. So initially I did see it when I first moved into my home because I wanted to know what was going there, but then it magically vanished from all of their drawings that they had available online. So that was kind of interesting. Let's see. Also to mirror other people's comments about apartments being right in the middle of single family homes. There really are no apartments anywhere in the immediate area that we are. It would be very random to just have these apartment complexes. I know it's not a huge facility that's going in, but it's still, I'm not sure if it really fits the space. Going back to tie in, it's actually not 100 homes in Stapleton. It's
So you'll need to wrap up pretty quick.
okay. It's 212 homes that are in Stapleton without the multifamily. The so-called amenity of a dog park. It's a joke. My border collie could take 5 steps and be across it. It's not really a dog park. They just fenced it off and gave a 2-way gate. Roll-up garage doors on the back of the home. That's really affecting curb appeal. I mean, when you're driving through there and you see that, it doesn't look like it's going to be very appealing to look at. Obviously reflect the reduced value of homes coming from this being put in. Also, when this was approved, most of all the homes that exist there now did not exist. There was nobody to come and speak on behalf of the pre-approval of this in 2018. Karen that spoke earlier, her house was built right around that time. My house, which was the last part of her phase, didn't finish until the end of 2020. So really, there was nobody here to speak on behalf. And
Sir, I'm going to have to cut you off. If you don't wrap it up.
the solution is not to deny it, but maybe change it to keep the same structure that they have in Stapleton already, which everybody seems to like. And I don't think that anybody would really have a concern with that if we were to just keep it the same that the rest of the development is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Anybody else? Just raise your hand if you want to come up and testify. All right. Seeing none, would the applicant like to come back up?
David Ruby, 499 Main Street. I don't probably have a lot to rebut about most of the comments. But I did want to clarify a couple things, and I seriously doubt it will sway the public's opinion behind me, but I think it's good information regardless. The drawings of the exterior elevations of the buildings and the floor plans will be developed through the CZC process. What these are, just so you can kind of put it in your minds as you deliberate, they are townhome style apartments. They're 2 stories. Each unit will be 2 stories. You walk in a front door, you'll have your living kitchen downstairs, bedrooms upstairs. They are only 2 stories, so they're no taller than any other house in the subdivision likely. I just wanted to again reiterate kind of our thoughts about the trying to follow through with the development agreement. It's a legally binding document, and that's what we're trying to follow. One of the comments that was just made that I'm kind of digesting as I'm standing here was a comment about changing it to houses. For one, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the city required the density to be what it is, and that's why there's apartments here in the first place. That aside, a vast majority of the comments I heard about traffic and those concerns would be almost identical with 4 or 5 homes than with 19 apartments. I mean, it's not that different. I mean, and I go to a lot of these hearings, and there's a lot of emotion involved, and I'm a homeowner too. I get it. I mean, this stuff is hard. And I usually put out a little pitch that maybe somewhere in the universe, someone will pick it up and educate realtors, because I see this a lot, that the realtors do not disclose this kind of thing. And it leads to bad blood and people feeling like they've been taken advantage of. That's my soapbox moment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any last questions?
Yeah, Mr.
Sir?
David,
On back up.
sorry. Just a question. There seemed to be a theme running through a lot of the public comments about being misled or not knowing. I'm just wondering if you have any comment in response to that.
Mr. Commissioner, I'm probably a bad one to ask, because I do this for a living. And so I do dig into records, and maybe I'm weird because I do this for a living. But when I built my last house, I went searching and found the plats, found every building permit or pool, whatever permit in the neighborhood. I read the life story of the developer. I just, similarly, I mean, people are invested in knowing what they live around. And I'm a little helpless in that, because as the architect, I don't know. I'm on one side of this world that sounds like the sales side, whether that's a realtor or a developer. I think it's realtors. So whether the developer, sounds like a lot of the misleading might be potentially the website, or I don't know that. Because the plots I've seen show, everything I've seen shows landscaping around here, and it talks about the apartments, more of them actually.
And that's where I was wondering if you could help me and put it on out for the public consumption, is what is ground truth on when was it publicly available that this was going to be multifamily?
I believe when the annexation and rezone were going through, that was part of it. They had to designate up to 24 units to meet the density requirement for this approval.
Do you know when that was?
I believe that's what the zone required. They are getting a little bit to the edge of my.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission.
Ma'am, please keep your comments down in the gallery. Thank you.
Yeah, as I testified earlier, when this project came through, we felt it was a little underserved, and we wanted a more integrated, cohesive, a mix of unit types. This particular development has duplex style homes. It has single family homes at single story. It has 2-story homes. And then now the developer is coming forward with his 3rd product type that he proposed with the original annexation in 18. So to Mr. Ruby's point, it is more of a townhome style development than a true multifamily. Really more of a triplex, fourplex. It is a smaller neighborhood multifamily development. The reason why we call it multifamily is because it's more than 3 units on a single parcel. That's how our code defines a multifamily development. But I would let the neighbors probably know this already, but there is an R40 piece of property directly to the west of this piece that will have 200 plus units on it in the future. And that's owned by, it's surrounded by KB residents. So I hope they're aware of that as well, because they're buying expensive homes in that development as well. Because I live in the area, so I'm very familiar with it as well. So and I wanted to speak to a little bit about the light, the signal at Harris. It's not an ACHD requirement, it's an ITD requirement. They control the timing for that signal. And at the time that Stapleton came through, the developer was required to pay their proportionate share towards the installment of that signal. So I don't have the timing for you as to when that light is going to go in, but there will be lights there. We probably need to get in contact with ITD and see when they anticipate that happening. And looking at the public record, ITD said this property does not abut a state facility, which again, the lot doesn't, but the Stapleton development does. And because of the number of units that were involved, neither ACHD or ITD required an updated traffic study. I just wanted to go on the record there. This is a small development. I know how you feel. The emotions are high. We get it. It was planned for. It's actually less than what was planned for, to be honest with you. It was originally, the concept plan showed 28 fourplex units, if I'm not mistaken. This is 19, 3 and 4plex units. So again, it's Stacy and I analyze these things. Staff looks at it. We go through the contract. We make sure everything is met. It's meeting the intent of the original approval. We feel comfortable we did, and that's why we recommended approval with changes, of course, with conditions, but that's how it works in our world. We verify, we look at past history, we make sure everything is in alignment with that, and we make a recommendation to you.
Thank you, Bill.
Chair.
Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Bill, question for you. I would wager the 200 unit development would warrant, a traffic study by someone. Is there, just roughly speaking, I don't need an exact number. Is there kind of, you have any idea what that line is of numbers of properties? For example, this is 19. If it were 20, would it have, or is it something more substantial?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Smith, the threshold for ACHD is typically a development with 100 or more units is the threshold for them, in my experience.
And then,
go ahead.
Question for the applicant. So one thing I've heard, I want to figure out a little bit what the kind of order of events has been, for lack of a better term. I believe I've heard a lot from the community that a lot of people said, but I believe you said at some point you sent out some sort of letters that got emails back. I'm just
Correct.
curious, could you help me kind of square the two? What happened?
Mr. Commissioner, yes, what we do is we reach out actually to the city who helps us with a special vicinity within like 500 feet of the outside property, and they have software that picks up every property that's touched by that, and they actually send us the labels, and we draft a letter, which I think is included in the record, and we invite them to a neighborhood meeting. And that's when I said, it was right after that, 2 days after that, that I received the 2 letters or emails because I had my address on there. And then I went out and hung out at the site for an hour and nobody came.
Any questions?
Which is what I'm required to do. I mean, that
completely understood.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
For around what date was that? Or
I looked at it, just
like,
says it, I think it's May 4th. Is that? Sorry, it's right here on the, I just saw it when I was sitting back in there because I was, May 4th. I was like, wow, it's over 2 months.
All good? Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. With that, I will take a motion to close the public hearing for file number H 2023-0033 for Stapleton Apartments.
Mr. Chairman, before you do that, let me just take a minute to brainstorm with the commission collectively.
Absolutely.
So there was you made the announcement earlier of our technology issues with Zoom, and you had at least one speaker address that issue as well. The testimony you received tonight, the public hearing that was conducted tonight complies with state law and with the city code. So, the commission can close the hearing and you can proceed with your action. I just want to make it clear to the audience in particular, but for everybody, that once you close the public hearing, however, the record is closed and you are in deliberation. So we're not able to accept additional emails or telephone calls after that. That won't be part of your deliberation. I just want you to be aware of that. That's perfectly fine within your purview and you're able to close the hearing, but I just want you to be aware we're not able to accept emails tomorrow morning, for example. So if you wanted to be able to do that, the solution would be to continue the public hearing and allow the hearing to stay open, but that's not required. I just wanted to be clear on what your options were.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, do we have a?
Mr. Chair.
Go right ahead.
I guess question for Kurt and I guess for Joy regarding if someone was, planning on attending via Zoom and maybe they sent to the email that Joy provided. And then would we be able to, I don't know, take a short recess and then would we be able to have that in the public record, those emails that just recently came in? Or is that kind of outside of the scope?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Smith, if I understood your question correctly, let me kind of paraphrase. Is your question, can you take a brief recess, see if we have received any email, see if anybody wants to make or send an email very quickly, and then you can consider that when you return from your recess? Yes, you can do that before you close, but don't close it. If you want to do that, don't close the public hearing yet then.
Understood.
Or if we do close the public hearing and make a continuance so that other people can.
Correct.
We close the public hearing then and then do a continuance for
No, we
other
would-
people to comment.
We would leave that. I was going to say continuance comes as part of the public hearing process. So we would leave it. We would not close the public hearing, but we would do a continuance during that. And that's, I guess my question to you is do you guys feel that we need to continue? And I can't make the motion. So you guys are going to make the motion on this.
Maybe to help the commission with that discussion, I don't know if the city clerk has additional information about this. My recollection, at least earlier, that we only had 2 people that attempted to even watch the proceedings via Zoom. We don't know if any of them intended to even testify or not, and they were notified that they could come to City Hall. So from a legal perspective, you're fine. I don't know if we had any additional people come on Zoom after that occurred.
No, we did not. And no one has emailed me during the meeting.
So that's just facts to help with your discussion.
Okay, understood.
I'm not really sure if, the additional comments from the neighbors would be any different than what we've already heard. It was a broad list of concerns. And even if there were 2 more emails, I think we have enough information to make a decision.
Mr. Chair, I tend to agree. I think it's just striking the balance of information gathering on our end, and then also just kind of allowing people to say their piece on their end. I don't think I would be, wanting to continue this to a future meeting, but it's just a question of if we want to say if there's someone who's just really burning up, but they have to watch the kids, giving them 5-10 minutes to send something our way to get that. That's I don't feel like very strongly one way or the other. That's just an option. I wanted to just surface in case.
Well, the 2 people that were on, one of them dropped off as soon as the last hearing was done. And so the other person very quickly thereafter. So I don't know that they were even on for this, to be honest, and no emails have been received. So, I'm comfortable closing the public hearing on this one.
All right. So in that case, Mr. Chair, I motion that we close the public hearing.
For file number H 2023-0033.
Sounds good to me.
Do I have a second?
Do we need a second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for file number H 2023-0033. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Public hearing is closed.
Mr. Chairman, can I interject one more time on a
Absolutely.
topic that came up on a couple of occasions, the applicant in particular brought up, that Mr. Parsons described as well as for this interplay between a development agreement from 2018 and your proceedings tonight relative to conditional use permit. So I don't have the benefit. I didn't have the opportunity to review the development agreement prior to tonight's meeting, so I wasn't aware this would be a topic, but I was able to skim it as you were receiving testimony. And so I don't have the benefit of looking at the entire record, and I only had the time to quickly review the development agreement. But my tentative, I'm just going to give you my initial thoughts on that. So not a legal opinion per se, preliminary thoughts. And that is that I can understand why there's may be some ambiguity here and why the applicant may feel the way the applicant feels, that I thought we had an agreement from 2018 and that's what's binding. I don't read the agreement that way. And there's two relevant sections that I just want to point out to the commission. Well, three actually by extension. The first condition is five that are relevant to our discussion is conditions 5G. It says site amenity. This is referring to the entire annexation, and this include all phases, including the multifamily parcel or area you're talking about today, as well as the other phases. The site amenities shall be provided within the development per those described in section 7.d. Comparable amenities as determined by staff may be considered as substitutions. So the applicant, paraphrasing what Mr. Ruby had mentioned earlier, that I think the applicant is reading is that is the maximum the city can require. That's not what the language says. The language says you will build, when you came to us to annex, you said you're going to do certain things, including certain amenities. And this provision says you shall build those amenities. It doesn't say that's the only thing you're ever going to require to do. It says basically you're going to do what you told us when you said you wanted to annex. Coupled with sub I, which is the other relevant section, says a conditional use permit is required to be submitted and approved for the multifamily development prior to application for certificate of zoning compliance and design review, which is what we're doing tonight. By definition, the conditional use permit process, under state law and the city code, the whole purpose of a CUP process is for you to provide conditions that mitigate the impacts of the project. So that provision wouldn't make sense unless it was intended to give you, the commission and the city, the possibility of applying conditions to mitigate negative impacts of this project. So my conclusion, just within the four corners of the document and reading that language in a very sterile attorney-like way, is that, the applicant is required by this development agreement to build a minimum number of amenities, and those are specified in the document via an attachment. But it also says you have to do a certificate of conditional use permit for the multifamily. And by definition, that means that the commission has the ability to apply conditions or place conditions that are needed to mitigate the impacts. There's no other reason why that condition would be there. So I think you have the ability to do that. I will close by saying I understand the applicant's perspective that, hey, we made a pitch in 2018 and it had these certain amenities. Our impression was we'll do that and we're good. So I understand that, but if I just look at the sterile language of the document, it doesn't say that necessarily.
Okay. Again, appreciate that input. Commissioner Orchard.
I have a question for staff. In 2018, when this was annexed and rezoned, and you mentioned that in order to meet its density requirements, multifamily housing had always been a part of this project. So if the community is saying, yes, we want to see it developed, but we'd rather see single family housing, from a density standpoint and a city code, it's not eligible, is it? It needs to be multifamily housing in some capacity. And when we say multifamily housing, a townhouse is a building like a house, except it's super skinny and it's connected to two or three other ones together, right? It's not a huge apartment complex where it's 2 stories and everybody has a balcony. So I think the perspective of what the unit looks like needs to be addressed here as well. Because if you have a two-story house, it's just like your two-story house, except it's super skinny, and then the guy next to him doesn't have like a walkway in between, they're connected. So to carry on, sorry, my little rant.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I like this discussion tonight because it is to kind of the discussion tonight. It's all discretionary, right? And I say that because at the time that someone comes up with an annexation and a concept plan, they don't have it fully vetted as to the open space, the amenities, the parking. And so that's why we add that condition, come back and do a CUP, because that's where we're checking for compliance with the multifamily standards and those things. So even though it was the intent possibly get 28 units, the reality is that when you look at the size of the property and what code requires, it's not realistic to get that. So that's why you see a decrease in that density. So there's always a little latitude in our code that says you can reduce your density somewhat. So when the developer came through, there was actually more, and I did go to the website for this development just to kind of look at it. It showed 5 buildable lots in that area, in that corner, but it was probably their intent at the time that they would build each one of those multifamily units on a separate parcel. So it looks misleading that it was going to be single family homes when in fact the city hadn't approved it conceptually as a multifamily development. So today we're at the reality that 28 units can't really fit on this property unless they went vertical, 3-story apartments. So again, what they're trying to do is turn the architect loose and say, design, this is your parameters, here's your parcel, design us a multifamily development consistent with our plan. And David goes out and digs into that. So yes, we have some wiggle room to manipulate some of that density, if you will, per the code. So when the final plat comes in, the applicant they may have showed 5 multifamily lots here. They have the ability to show 1 because the lots doesn't correlate to density. The density is correlating to what you're acting on tonight and what's specified in the development agreement. So in this particular case, you lose a few units, they may have made up some additional buildable lots elsewhere, and it kind of averages itself out. So again, that's where Stacy and I come in, look at that, analyze that, make sure that they're still being consistent with their conditions of approval and their contract. And that's where we landed tonight, that we find they are.
But one of the conditions we can't make is to change it to single family housing.
That would require a modification to their plat and their DA. So they would have to re-subdivide it or essentially do a 5-lot with 5 single-family homes on one parcel and still meets the definition of multifamily. But to me, that wouldn't be the intent of the original agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one additional thought, which is very similar to your last hearing. It's essentially what was just discussed, but to Mr. Ruby's point earlier, in a different sense, there is a development agreement that applies to this property that was done at the time of annexation. It contemplates multifamily explicitly in the concept plan and elsewhere in the verbiage. So there is a certain entitlement for this property today. It's subject to a conditional use permit, but once, just like our last project, we really don't as a city have the ability to say we changed our mind and don't build anything or build something different. That's really not a possibility without incurring legal liability for the city.
Okay. Commissioner Grace?
Well, just on that point, I want to make clear, I think the term misled is a really hot button item here. And while you may have looked at maybe a map and thought something else, there seems to be, unless I'm wrong, plenty of documentation and summary in the record to demonstrate what this was always going to be. That's why I asked Mr. Ruby, tell me when it became public that this was going to be multifamily. I'd like to know that so that I can at least have some ability to say, well, it's been this way for years. And I understand the frustration from folks who don't have the time or maybe the expertise to look through a public record and the city files and things, and they believe that this is not what they thought. And I appreciate that. But that's what I was trying to drill down on is it sounds like that's what it was going to be though. And so this conversation, I really appreciate the back and forth.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if I could just give you a little bit more history on this property and to the residents too, because I am definitely sensitive to what they have to say tonight. But believe it or not, the developer actually wanted to do all single family here. And it's part of our work with them. And we requested that they add that multifamily component. So I just want to go on the record that that's something that we encouraged, planning staff did as part of this project to get that density up a little bit more and get them in alignment to what we thought was appropriate on this particular property. So, and the developer put it there because they knew there was another R40 piece next to it. So they thought that made the adequate transition in density as they transition to this single family. So that's kind of some more food for thought on how this all kind of transpired and happened. But to Commissioner Grace's point, this was always on the books from when it first got noticed for public hearing in 2018. It was always disclosed that there was a multifamily lot here.
Richard Smith.
Yeah, I just, I think it's a transitory density, the word I've been looking for. I think it's critical to remember that, hey, this is, am I on? Am I?
Yep.
Good? Okay, I'll just
Here.
bring it closer. I'm just, all right. I'll just have better microphone technique. Appreciate that. There we go. Is that better? Good. Awesome. Yeah, I think it's critical to remember that this is zoned and it's in the future land use map as high density residential. And I think you know, that transitory density is helpful. I think that, you know, when there's going to be 200 homes in development to the west, 150, 200 homes, something like that, it's helpful to have some sort of, you know, lower density, high density residential, you know, there's having some kind of transitory where it slightly gets more dense over time. I'd rather have that than it, you know, go for transition from single family to immediately, you know, much more dense property. So I get that. And as someone who lives on Meridian, I get the, especially during rush hour, I live right near Settlers Park where it's down to one lane each way. And if I have to turn left into my neighborhood, sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm causing a backup behind me for 5 minutes because I can't find a way to turn. I get the frustration. It's rough sometimes. But you know, I think this is a good fit and a good project for the area. You know, ITD said that it doesn't need a traffic study, and I think that it makes sense with it being kind of this small. You know, I think when you look at the alternative of traffic studies for kind of a lot of small different parcels, you get something like California, where San Francisco has built 8 homes this year, I think last time I checked. And prices there are, you know, it's so unaffordable to live there. And I think that's something that it's important to balance the livability, the responsible growth with kind of, you know, fitting into the community needs and keeping, you know, matching the demand that there is to live in Meridian. And I think that that's, you know, important to remember that the multifamily is coming in this area. Having this transitory density is good. And then also just to hopefully give some people an outlet if there are red light concerns, if there are, you know, speeding concerns. I believe in the state of the city, the mayor said there's a plan to hire more police officers, but, you know, Meridian Police is always there for cut through traffic. ECHD is always willing to do a study. They're also looking at maybe reducing the barriers to getting, I think speed tables is what they're calling them. There's a specific, you know, traffic calming. There are a bunch of things that I think actually you might have said some of this is ITD, but there are a lot of things that we can do to calm the traffic issues within the neighborhood, crossing the street, et cetera. So I'm a little bit on a soapbox here, but I really empathize as I live on Meridian and I've seen this. kind of stuff, these traffic concerns. But I think this is a good fit for the area. I think it's a good transitory density into larger development. And as much as that information asymmetry, that not knowing is bad, and as much as we need to probably improve so people don't need to do a ton of research, I don't know that that's a good enough reason to deny this.
Let's say as far as the, I mean, the stoplight from Harris Road onto Meridian Road, I'm sure it's needed. I just don't know when ITD is going to get to it. That said, everybody that bought a home in there understood that when they moved in. So, I mean, that one was pretty obvious, I would have to think. So, I mean, y'all turned in, y'all looked at the places you were going to live. So, is it a hazard? Yes. Is there something that's going to be done about it? Yes. There'll be a stoplight on Meridian Road. So when it's going to be put in, we're not quite sure. So, but that's something to, ITD, they own the highways. So if you are interested in knowing when that stoplight will put in, please contact ITD. So, unfortunately, we can't do a lot about roadways here. So we don't own them. The city doesn't anyway. As far as, the developer or, whoever being deceptive about this, if the entire community feels that way, I mean, there's legal avenues to approach that. So, and I mean, if the entire community feels that way, I recommend that you look into that. I want to carefully address the stigma around apartments as well. So, I mean, these aren't apartments, they're actually kind of more of a townhome thing, but just multifamily developments in general. So have a stigma tied to them. So I have kids that live in apartments, so they're pretty decent human beings and trying to take care of stuff. I realize there's people out there that don't. So we have owners in our subdivision that don't. So I don't think it's fair just to tie to multifamily developments that there's going to be nefarious elements in there. So, I mean, I think that we've all seen in developments everywhere that, these people exist everywhere. So it only takes one or two people to kind of ruin it for everybody. So that's kind of my soapbox moment about that, just because it's really expensive to live here. I mean, one of my children doesn't live in Meridian anymore just because can't afford it. So, and that's in a rental. That's unfortunate. But as far as the development that's, in front of us, my big concern is on, and I usually defer to supporting staff. I mean, I generally don't vary from that very much. So I think if staff has pointed out that some things need to be done in here, then I'll support that. I mean, I agree if there's only one, if they have, like the last application, if you have one place, multiple trash bins and things like that, then that makes sense to have it centrally located, just as long as there's more than one opportunity to, or more than one receptacle to put stuff into. So as far as the parking, I mean, if you're having trouble meeting the minimum, come on. I mean, just put some extra in there. It's not going to kill anybody. So, I mean, I don't know. I always think back to my dad, he always told me, you're never going to get anywhere if you just want to meet the minimum. So be willing to give a little bit. So as far as the amenities, I understand the gray area in it. The one thing I don't want is some kludgy little thing that's just thrown in there at the last second in order to kind of satisfy some requirement where, you get this little 5-foot area for dog park or something along those lines. It would be nice for something to be meaningful in there. And I mean, I think that there's some common area in here that would accommodate something that would be usable by the folks that are in here. That said, I would be more interested in seeing a walk, some kind of traffic mitigation that allows people to get across Lone Pine Way to get to the other parts of the subdivision where there are better amenities, because honestly, I don't see that as a bad alternative. And I think that would help with the safety overall of the entire subdivision, to be honest. The one thing that I do like about it, I know some people don't share this feeling, but I do like the storage units, to be perfectly honest. So we see a lot of stuff come in where, and generally speaking, it comes with garages. So people that have garages like to, park $40,000 worth of cars outside to stack $1,000 worth of stuff in their garage. So that's never made sense to me, but I do like the fact that these have storage that's there. We're finding that some people move into the community, they're looking for a place to live, to rent while something's being built. So, I mean, it's very conceivable that the very people that live in these apartments are going to live in your neighborhood right next to you, eventually. So, and the fact that there's storage that comes along with this, that's something that's going to be highly sought after. I mean, a lot of people move here and it's taking 6 months to a year to build a house. So they got to live somewhere. I mean, there's some other things that I like about the layout of it. The fact that the density did come down is nice. I mean, it's part of a bigger project, but this piece right here would be what we would consider infill at some point in time if it didn't get fleshed out. With this, basic element of it or basic design of it. So I can appreciate where it's at and what it's doing. That said, I don't see anything, and I understand the traffic problems and everything. I mean, you heard me on the last application. So not happy with where the city stands as far as what we can do about the roadways. We don't own them. We don't have a lot of sway in them, to say the least. So we're not included in any kind of approval for a roadway system through ACHD or ITD. So I find that to be an unfortunate part of the way that our government is set up. But that's not going to be solved tonight. So I'll quit rambling on and let somebody else talk or make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make a couple comments and I would try to do so without repeating what you said or what the other commissioners have said, because I do agree with a lot of that. I like the townhome style. We don't control the streets. I mean, I know some of this was said, but it's worth emphasizing. And I'm really glad, Commissioner Seal, that you said something about the sort of the characterization of folks who live in apartments, because it was on my list of items to address. And I guess I won't say anything more than, I have a daughter too. I have a professional young daughter who cannot afford a home. And she lives in an apartment with her family. And I know other professionals and they pay higher rent than I pay mortgage. And so these folks are just trying to get ahead as well and get started. And they didn't come from out of state and were able to sell a home and buy a single family home here. They grew up here and they struggle. So I would welcome to call someone like that and other people I know, other families I know, to call them neighbors, and what they've done here and coming down in the units and making them the townhome style. I really like that. So again, without trying to repeat what's already been said, I'll be voting in favor of this.
Mr. Smith?
Sure, yeah, I guess the only thing that I think maybe we should probably identify before motion is made is kind of how we want to approach the amenities issue kind of more specifically. I know there's discussion of, I guess the question is on Lone Pine, is that, since that's internal to the development, does the developer have control over that? Are we able to actually, is there any way to have a provision in the CUP that they have some sort of crosswalk or something like that across the road? Because if not, where my position is I probably think that they should have, if not that, they probably should have an additional amenity. I would also like for it not to be thrown together, but even if it's just a bike repair station, I think that can be a valuable amenity for the community to use. And I'd like for there to be an additional amenity that can be accessible by entirety of the community. There is one, not just the storage sheds. So those are just kind of my thoughts there. I don't know, again, what we can require in terms of connectivity to the other amenities.
I'll kind of throw that question back to staff a little bit. So if we modify nothing and we're speaking to pretty much to the parking, the trash receptacles, and the amenities, if we make no modifications at all, essentially, I think what that does is we support what staff has asked, which is basically add the amenities, put more trash receptacles in, and add the parking required. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, yes, that would be correct. Staff will work with the applicant on the additional amenity to add to the site, if you would like to keep it the way it is with our conditions.
Okay, so with no modifications, then, and that's kind of the statement I made before, is where generally speaking, I try and support staff in their recommendations. So they've, although we've spent a lot of time on this tonight, they have spent a lot more time on this.
Mr. Chair, I guess in that case, the only thing I would add is if we could, what would, I guess, make me say a little, ma'am, I appreciate that. I'm trying to, I'm trying not to get the mic in my mouth. But I appreciate that. And I hope this is better. Where I was at is I would hope that if we could modify to ask that second amenity be accessible by the entirety of the subdivision, something like a bike rack or something that isn't just closed off to the new developments. Hopefully to just provide some kind of additional benefit to the existing residents and things like that is the only thing I would maybe consider modifying. But I agree with that. I just wanted to see if there's anything we could do about the interconnectivity, but.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Smith, and I'm going to ask my planning colleagues to comment on this as well. I'm a bit hesitant to go down that path, and that, the reason we're dealing with this tonight is the conditional use permit for the multifamily parcel. To the extent the condition sort of now kind of bleeds over to beyond those boundaries to other parts of the overall subdivision. I don't know really that's within your purview tonight. Your conditional use permit applies to this particular use being proposed, not to adjacent phases of a broader development. Mr. Parsons, you have thoughts about that?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I think for me, the only thought I had is the fact that if the development agreement, the findings are gray, and technically it's those are to be shared, and that's how I get there. But to your point, I almost like where Commissioner Smith is going about adding the bicycle repair facility or something like that, because it doesn't take a lot of area up. And it does kind of contribute that extra value to the community, in my opinion, because you're gonna have multi-use pathways in the areas. You're gonna have a park. I think that's a good balance, striking that balance. Whenever we're talking about improvements to roadways or linking open spaces together, I'm like legal, I get a little hesitant on that, because we're always at a mercy. I don't want to put you in a situation or give the neighbors expectation that may not be realistic because of who we have to work with, and try to get those, because it may not be approved or may be an obstacle that the developer will have to go to get a crosswalk. I don't know how all of that works with ACHD and whether or not they would support, although I do like that idea. It makes a lot of sense. If you want to take credit for something, then lead people to that amenity. I really like that suggestion. So again, we're going to default to you. We have our recommendation. You have our conditions of approval. You've heard the testimony tonight. CEP is your purview. You can require things to mitigate some of the concerns you heard tonight.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Smith?
Question for Kurt in terms of the legality. Would it be possible to maybe say an amenity that is not enclosed Because it seems like most of the things on this list that would be kind of would be limited to this present CUP residents are the, enclosed storage and things like that. Would it be possible to say something like an amenity that is not enclosed? Because obviously trying to strike the line between publicly accessible, meaning like the entire public, versus, I guess I'm just spitballing some ways to, is it possible to even do this, even if we want to?
Would something like easily accessible to the entire, oh, I was gonna say, you can't say subdivision, easily accessible to the
Communal.
entire community? No, I mean,
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Smith, so my concern is the same in that, the condition applies to this project. It's not really, the condition is not intended, the purpose of the CUP is not intended to put amenities or mitigations in place that's going to benefit a neighboring parcel or a different phase of a subdivision. Mr. Parsons makes a fair point that the original development agreement does contemplate shared amenities and things of that nature. So I like that thought as a reason to word the condition in that manner. The safest place to be is to have the condition apply to the multifamily development area, period, and leave it at that, which is sort of how the conditions are worded today. I think if you wanted to go a little bit beyond that, I'm sort of wordsmith with you on the fly, but maybe it's something that says something to the extent practical, to the extent possible, make these amenities available to the remainder of the subdivision consistent with the provisions of the development agreement. Something of that nature might be work little less of a safe harbor, but I think because the original DA did contemplate shared amenities, that makes some sense to me. To the extent practical, consistent with the DA, the amenity will be available to the overall the original development that's covered by the original DA.
Sorry, I was taking notes.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
In that case, Mr. Chair, I think I'm ready to make the motion.
Feel free.
Right. After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H-2023-0033 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of July 20th, 2023, with a modification that the developer, to the extent possible, or to the extent practical, ensure that the additional amenity recommended by staff is accessible by the remainder of the subdivision, consistent with the original development agreement.
Do I have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve file number H-2023-0033 Stapleton Apartments. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Motion.
Nay.
Okay. Motion passes. All right. And with that, I will take one more motion.
Mr. Chair, I motion we adjourn.
It's been moved and seconded. We adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. We are adjourned.